right, we are now live. So, welcome to this live stream. My name is Marcel, and I have with me
Kilani. And you don't have your last name on there. I was going to say, as you can see from our last names, we're related. We're a father-daughter coaching duo, but he has the same last name as me.
Yeah, that's right. So Kilani is my daughter, and we've been in business now for a little while together, building Level 5 Partners as a company, and which by the way is growing quite rapidly. Kilani actually doesn't even know this, but I actually just spoke with a potential managing director in India, so who's going to be heading up the business for us over there. So we're, and she's like, oh wow, but yeah. So we're expanding rapidly. We also just signed an agent in Europe, who happens to be my brother. So we're keeping it in the family, which is really cool. And we also have an agent in Taiwan and China, who is also coming in. So I see we have Benjamin. Benjamin is saying hello. So I'm just going to say, hey Benjamin, how's it going? Are you enjoying your day? I don't know where you're at. So where are you based, Benjamin? Let's see where Benjamin is. That takes a little while to answer. So I mean, exciting things happening for Level 5 Partners, which I'm really excited about. Talk about that. Here's Level 5 Partners. Great little banner. Little overlay that we use for this show, and starting with that, we thought it might be a real fun idea to kind of do a weekly show, and this weekly show is really around Kilani and I just having a chat and talking about leadership and talking about kind of what we're up to and what we're doing. And if you chime in, we're here to help you. If you have any questions or you have anything that you say, hey, maybe Marcel and Kilani can, help me with this, feel free to throw that in, and we're welcome to address whatever questions you might have as well. So without further ado, we're going to kind of jump into today's episode. And Kilani, would you like to do the introductions for the episode?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to be talking about a topic that I have been diving a lot into recently, and something that I find really fascinating, and that's the topic of interpersonal communication, which, as we know, is a huge topic in really any area of life, but also more specifically in leadership, which is the area that we're going to be focusing on today. And specifically in communication, what we're going to be talking about is understanding presence in communication, which I like to call the prerequisite of effective communication, again, in any area of life. But most people don't really talk about this as being one of the important foundations of communication. So we're going to really dive into what presence means in communication, how to do it, how to practice it, and maybe even go into some examples or our personal experience.
Nice. Awesome. Looking forward to it. Yeah. And by the way, congratulations, because the article that you wrote for our newsletter, of course, is Leadership for a New Generation. And that was your first article writing on leadership.
Yeah.
And there was some real great reviews on that. So congratulations. I'm super proud of you for just jumping in there and kind of daring to throw yourself in there in the LinkedIn world, and and it was received really well. People really, really enjoyed it. So we have over 3,000 subscribers now, which is really cool. So they're all really enjoying our content as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear that everyone enjoyed the article. And I guess today's conversation is going to be an expansion on that article. So for those of you listening who really enjoyed that article, this is a little bit more of an in-depth review of a very similar topic.
Yeah, and at the same time, if you haven't read the article yet, feel free to go to our newsletter. As I said, it's Leadership for a New Generation. You can subscribe, and we try to publish a new article on leadership about once a week or so. So, feel free to subscribe, and then you get that nicely in your inbox once a week. Yeah. And Kilani, you were mentioning you have some questions that were kind of thrown out to you, right? That you wanted to throw into this group that you thought might be a great conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually a mix of combinations based on my own experiences and questions that have come to me, as well as questions that
Uh-huh.
I've been personally asked by mainly my clients, but also some people who I know personally in my life when it comes to communication. So, are,
Uh-huh.
are you ready to jump right into
Hey, yeah,
questions? Okay.
totally, absolutely, yeah.
So the first one's going to be a super easy one for you to answer. I think you're going to love this question. But it's, what does presence in communication really mean?
Okay, well, a beautiful question. And by the way, not so simple. Uh, because I think there are different layers to presence, right? And when especially when practicing mindfulness, there are so many different layers to our psychology and our way of being, that a simple answer of presence, right, would be, well, to simply be present, and I think a lot of my coaching clients and the people that I speak with, a lot of these people really kind of think that they are present, right? In many situations, you highlighted this in your article as well. Is that very often we think we're being present, but in reality, we might be somewhere else, right? Where you might in your article you wrote about how you were thinking about this phone call that you were on just prior to this conversation that you were having with one of your consultants, and you're that's the challenge of presence is how are we 100% physically, emotionally, and mentally, cognitively present with another person. And so true presence really is happens not just between the ears, but it also happens in the heart, and it happens in the gut, and it happens in the body, to really fully be able to connect with the person or the situation that we are actually being present in, and to be able to do that without any form of distraction or any loss of thoughts. And that's why people who meditate, for example, have a tendency to be able to practice presence easier, right? Because meditation is a form of presence, right? Because we're constantly learning to be present with our breathing, with our bodies, with ourselves. And so in order for us to be present with somebody else, we have to learn to be present with ourselves first. And we have a tendency to get in our own way, right? As human beings, we complicate the hell out of everything, right? And that creates a lot of challenges for us. So it's that ability to just let all of that go, right? And so giving ourselves that permission is one of the biggest challenges, and really fully being present and with whoever we're coaching, or in our clients' cases who we're leading, right? And I will tell you, I have this conversation more often than not, is how to actually let go, right? How to actually kind of just stay out of the way of the person, just give them their space by being fully present. And that's basically what presence really is, right? Is to really be fully mentally, emotionally, and physically present with the person or with the situation that you're in that moment of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's such a great point about sometimes we think we're being present. I feel that
Hmm.
a lot of times we're taught that the idea of presence is looking the other person in the eye, facing towards them, maybe leaning in a little bit. But at the end of the day, if you're not beyond physically there with them, like you said, it involves your heart on a different level, you're not going to be able to connect with them in that same way. And to take kind of a sidestep here, this reminds me a lot of the work that we do with the five energies, and we won't get too technical with that. I just have a short add-on question here, is if you
Uh,
could talk a little bit about how that maybe impacts the nicer model. And for those of you who don't know, the nicer model is the model that we use for another form of communication that really, I think, connects with the idea of presence. Because in order for you to bring that into practice, you need to be present with that person.
Yeah. I actually just got a notification that apparently LinkedIn is not streaming anymore. So I'm actually just going to, I'm just going to add that. How do I, 1 second.
It bumped us
Little
out.
technical, yeah, LinkedIn kind of bumped us out. So I'm going to say, move. Okay, now. Okay, I'm just going to go one more. And that should be good. Right, my apologies. There we go. We are back on LinkedIn. So that bumped us out, and now we're just hopping back in. Either way, we're still on Facebook, so that's great. But it still makes for a really good chat, and hopefully people will come on board again from LinkedIn. Yeah, so definitely, and I love that you picked this subject of presence, because it's really close to my heart as well. So what do you feel, right? Like is in I guess the people that you speak with, right? What do you think is kind of their big block that kind of gets in the way of them being present? I'm not just throwing this at you, Kilani. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of times we live in the past or the future. Very rarely are we actually centered in this moment. We're raised in this fast-paced world, right? Especially with the rise of technology and social media. There's always something else to be paying attention to be looking forward to be preparing for, looking back on. And I think that there's just so much space filled up with things that are ahead of us or behind us that we forget how much is actually here with us right now. So I think that, per person, it's going to be different, because I think we all have, based on our experiences, what we're looking forward to, what we're looking back at. But I think that at the end of the day, there's just so much around us that is not in the present that takes precedence over what's in the present.
Yeah, and it makes sense, right? It's kind of like that saying, right? Of what happened in the past was yesterday, and what's happening in the future is tomorrow. But what happening in the present is a true gift, right? And the gift of living happens in the moment, right? And being present. And one of the challenges is that we tend to, as human beings, we tend to either be forward thinking or backward thinking, rather than just present thinking, right? And we what was that, a famous saying of, when we look in the past, it drives depression, and when we look into the future too much, then it drives anxiety, right? But true happiness lives just here, right? And I think that's a difficult thing for a lot of people too, right? Because if as you're saying that out loud, I'm also thinking, so many people, right, when they're listening to a loved one, for example, right, or somebody that they really care about, the level of care, right, that they're feeling, has a tendency to get in the way of their ability to be present, right? Because the more we care about something, the more we get emotionally invested. And the more emotionally invested that we're in, the more stuck we get in our own story, and we get stuck in kind of what's happening in the future or what happened in the past, rather than just being here, right? And I think that's one of the challenges, especially when you see that with professionals, right? Because professionals have a tendency to care about the work that they're doing, and because they care about the work that they're doing, they're always going to be focusing forward, or they're going to be focusing backward. They're not necessarily really going to be present. You almost have to, in a weird kind of way, you almost have to not care so much, right? There's kind of a Goldilocks zone of where if you don't care enough, right, you're disengaged and you're not going to do anything. But on the other hand, when you care too much, right, it can be totally devastating. I've been there before, and I'm sure everybody that's listening has been there before, about, in a situation where we actually cared too much. And then because we cared so much, we were so emotionally invested in whatever was happening, that it really became about us, right? I know, I almost lost a business, the business that I invested in many years ago, because I was so emotionally invested, because I cared so much about the business, that the business became about me, and it didn't become about the business. And I had to let go of the care, almost, in that deep kind of, level, and almost be okay, right, letting go a little bit of the control that I wanted to have over, the handlings, and how the operations and all of that kind of stuff in the business. And the more I cared, right, the more difficult it became for me to let go. And so it's a really fine balance between kind of like, sitting in that zone, that Goldilocks zone, between not caring enough and caring too much, and having that perfect amount of care, right, which then allows you to be able to be kind of fully present. Yeah, it's actually really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we see that a lot, especially in personal relationships. I think owning a business is a great example too, because I've definitely been there myself in my own business. But I see that a lot with parents and kids is a big one, that a lot of people I
Right.
speak to, yeah, a lot of people I speak to who are parents, I think including you've mentioned this
Yeah.
too, that when you have a kid or someone you care about that deeply, maybe even in your relationship, it's hard to just kind of step back and observe and look at things from a centered point of view, because you care so much. And I
That's
think
right.
that for sure there's nothing wrong with caring that deeply. In fact, it's important. But to be able to bring some of that presence where necessary into those moments of care can allow you to kind of stitch them together in the perfect way, to allow you to be present with that person and be there for them rather than for yourself, and then to be able
Uh,
to take strategic action from there on how to help them if they want to be helped.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is actually really interesting that we're talking that up. It's almost like a seesaw, right? Kind of trying to find that balance, and I think that's where mindfulness and training presence is such an important thing, because it helps us stay in that Goldilocks zone,
Yeah.
right, where we don't go. And especially with family, right, with raising kids, the amount of people I know who are so, including me, right, who are so deeply invested emotionally, and it's so easy to go overboard and make, and then and the language that we then very hear is I want this for my child, and I'm
Mhm.
afraid of this, and I'm that. And in reality, what they're talking about is them, right? It's when we care too much, it becomes about me. It doesn't become about you, right? And that should be a clear indicator, that we're not present anymore. If I'm just talking about the things that I want, right? Then we're not being present with each other anymore. Yeah, interesting. Oh, perfect.
And this is actually another connection that I have here, and this will be the last thing I add before our last question.
Uh-huh.
But I was actually on a call last night where this was brought up, and it's the idea that everyone is always coming from their place of care. And so when you
Hmm.
have a boss, a parent, a child, whoever who you're not getting along with, who you're judging, who you're annoyed at, any kind of frustrating feelings there, it it comes from a place of care, whatever they're doing, even though from your point of view it may seem like they're being whatever, insert
Yeah.
whatever word, right? They're always
Yeah.
coming from a place of wanting the best. And I think
Yeah.
that that's really helpful when it comes to needing to have tough conversations or confrontational conversations, to just understand that everyone is always coming from a place of wanting to do something good.
Absolutely. And it actually reminds me of, and I wrote this in my book, Five Energies of Horrible Bosses, by the way, which I can grab right here. So, Five Energies of Horrible Bosses, get it now on Amazon, just throwing it in there. See, but I wrote that in the book as well, is that, when somebody is coined a horrible boss, most likely they don't see themselves as a horrible boss. They just see themselves as a person who cares deeply about something, right? It just happens to be a different care than what employees might care about, right? And so there's a misalignment there, and so very easily that person can be seen as a horrible boss. And of course, and in all likelihood, that's how they're experienced. But at the end of the day, they themselves are not going to see themselves as being a horrible boss. They're just projecting a different energy because they're in a different state of care, right? And so, yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And that is something to think about, right? If you have a loved one, or you have an employee, or you have a boss for that matter, who's behaving in a way that you think is horrible or that you think is irritating, understand that that person is behaving that way because they care about something, right? So even a great example of that is Vladimir Putin, right? We can all call him, whatever it is that we want to call him, but at the end of the day, he's doing something because he cares about something. But his care is different than our care, right? And so therefore it's misaligned, and so therefore we can easily coin that person as a monster, as horrible, and absolutely things are horrible that are happening in Ukraine. I couldn't imagine being there right now, and it is so bad, what these people have to go through. But at the end of the day, there's not a human being on this planet that doesn't do something for a reason, right? And the reason is their care. What do they actually care about? And finding out that care very often helps us be able to connect with that person in a much more empathetic way. And empathy is the driver for presence, because without empathy, we can't be present with another human being. As much as we would want to judge a person, we would want to label them as a horrible employee or as a horrible boss or a horrible leader or whatever it is, the moment we do that, empathy goes out the window. And when empathy goes out the window, we stop being present with that person and with their care. Right? Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. What a great insight, Kilani. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And
God, I wish I had your wisdom when I was 22.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Probably from all our conversations growing up. When you grow up with a dad as a coach, these are your day-to-day.
We are literally simulating the dinner table conversation,
Yeah.
by the way, right? Every now and then we also have a Star Wars or Marvel conversation, but it also goes down the same route of geekiness.
Pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. And what was the last question?
The last question is, how can we practice presence in communication?
Oh, okay, great. I would recommend practicing presence in communication by yourself, and that's where you start, because being present is being present with yourself first, right? So rather than getting muddled in models and way that we try and talk to people and stuff like that, learn to be present with yourself. That's the number one most important thing you want to be learning to do, right? Because if you can't be present, you can't be empathetic with yourself, it's going to get very difficult for you, right? The next step is to practice, and once you're there, the next step is to practice in an arena that doesn't matter. Right? And what I mean with that is, think of a pilot learning how to fly an airplane, right? They have a tendency to use a simulator to learn how to fly the airplane. They don't hop in an airplane right away and say, hey, let's fly this airplane, because chances are it's going to crash, right? And so they use a simulator for that. You also want to do the same thing with yourself. You want to put yourself into situations where you can mess up, right? So, think of your social circles. Think of, your commutes. If you happen to be on a bus, right? Try communicating with somebody, a total stranger on the bus, while being 100% present with them. It's quite an experience, and it's also quite a connection that you build with people in a very, very quick way, especially strangers. And I can give you a great example of that, actually, of a pilot. We were actually in Los Angeles a couple of weeks ago, and Kilani, Ursula, my wife, and I, we came out of we were actually in an elevator, and a gentleman stepped in, and who was in his workout gear. And I just kind of simply asked him, I said, hey, looks like you're going to go for a workout. He says, oh yeah, I got to do, I got to work out, got to, take care of myself. I'm a pilot. I'm with Hawaiian Airlines. He flies between Hawaii and LA. And I'm like, oh, that's so awesome. We love Hawaii. Hawaii's like a second home to us, right? And And the most interesting thing happened was he actually took over the conversation, which happens rarely for me. So that was quite an impact that it had on me. And he showed such deep interest in us as a family. There was no inclination for him to talk about himself. All he wanted to know was about us as a family, where we're from, what we're doing, what we're like, to a point, which I thought was really interesting, to a point that we actually ended up out of the elevator, and he still kept asking questions, and didn't even go to the gym. And I said, hey, don't you have to go for a workout? He says, oh, it'll happen later. I find you guys fascinating, right? And I think that's a very important part of presence, is really kind of being interested and being fascinated by the people that you're interacting with, right? Don't simply assume that you know what they're talking about, that you know who they are, and that we know nothing about the other human being. And the sooner you realize that, and the more fascinated you can become in that human being, the greater your presence is going to be. And that person made an impact on me that I'm still remembering that person 1 month later, just from a simple elevator conversation. And that was impressive, right? So there are people around who just naturally are present with other people. And so practice it in the elevator, practice it, in the bus, practice it, wherever you are. Practice being present with another human being. Then when that becomes more comfortable, then you can start taking it to the bigger leagues, right? Then you can start saying, okay, I think I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable in this present space. I'm going to take this and do something, at work. I'm going to, work with my people. I'm going to practice being more present with them as well and see what happens. That would be my advice to kind of help people move into that more kind of, present state in communication.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I like the idea of finding a place to practice where there aren't any stakes at all, where you can just mess up and give yourself permission to be vulnerable and to try new things. And I think that's a perfect connection into talking about leadership, Jim, if you wanna talk about that.
Fantastic. Yeah, because at the end of the day, right, it all comes down to practice. And what we were just talking about is really finding a place where you can practice. And when we look at ourselves as human beings and how we operate, we are actually just the product of practice. Right? If you're not getting the results that you want in your life, it's because you're practicing something every day that's not getting you the results that you want. Right? But regardless, we're practicing something. We practice how we wake up. We practice how we get dressed. We practice how we speak to our loved ones in the morning when we say hello and all of that. We practice manners. We practice everything every single day. And the way the brain learns is through practice, is through repetition. And so the more that we kind of repeat and that we practice things, that becomes more kind of firm in the brain. Right? So it's a process called neuroplasticity, and so it becomes more plastic. And so then it becomes more difficult for the brain to unravel some of these habits that have just been a result of practice. And so what we've done is we've created something called the Leadership Gym. And the Leadership Gym is a once per week gym. It's a class where you get to practice, where you get to flex some muscles, and you get to flex some of your leadership muscles. The class is at 8 p.m. on Wednesdays in Eastern Standard Time in North America, because Kilani's in Toronto, which would make it Thursday morning, 8 a.m. for us here in Singapore, because I'm in Singapore, so that's 12 hours later. And I would say join us for that leadership gym. If you go to the Level 5 Partners LinkedIn page or the Facebook page, the link is actually on there to sign up for the gym. And once you sign up for the gym, you'll automatically be added into the list of members. Membership is free, and the beauty of it is you don't even have to attend class. So we all know you're all busy, so you don't have to attend class. If you don't attend class, of course we do appreciate you attending class, because nicer to have somebody around. But if you're not around, that's okay. We'll send you the link of the video once we've actually done with the class. So you'll still get to see the classes and you still get to practice stuff. Yeah, so feel free to sign up for the leadership gym, and I will also leave the link in a comment box of this video once we are done, because I don't think I can do that right now. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, that's all I have. Is there anything else that you wanted to throw in there?
No, perfect timing too. Nice 30 minutes, which is great. So all I would like to say is, if you like this video and you enjoyed it, join us next week. We're gonna hop on again, and again we're gonna have a very kind of light conversation. Feel free to throw in questions and comments. It's all good. And if if the video is helpful for you, feel free to share it. Right, because that's the beauty of the live video. Live video doesn't go away. You can watch it afterwards. It's in our live feed. It's on the Level 5 LinkedIn page as well as Facebook page. It's also on my personal page if you happen to be connected with me. And share it with other people. And maybe there was something in there that they find interesting about being present. And in the meanwhile, stay in touch. That's it for me.
Yep, same here. Thank you so much for coming in and watching today.
Awesome, same. Right, thank you, and thank you, Kilani, for joining me. It was so much fun. I enjoyed it. Look forward to the next one. Yeah, that's awesome. And I'll see you at the gym.
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so I'll so I'm logging off. Thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you next week. See ya. Bye-bye. Bye.